Oh, it actually did it. Okay, so wait a few seconds. All right, everybody. Hey, guess what? It is Disclaimers by Ed Johnston. Today is May 12th, 2018. It is a Saturday. It is currently 5:04 Pacific Standard Time. Now, I need everybody who's listening actually knows their identity. They know who they are. But do you know who the federal government or the corporation thinks you are and how they're using it? Starting with when you were thrown out at sea with your birth certificate, and every time you apply for a job using your social security number. Ed, why don't you explain that to him?
Okay, I want to get into that, and I want to get a couple few things going. Bring into it. First, I want to bring some interesting thing I'm working on right now. Anyhow, before I get going, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. We are not lawyers, attorneys, professionals, or people out for financial gain off of the structure that is created by the system itself. So that's the one thing that people have to realize what the system is compared to what they're claiming that they think it is or what they're doing. And that's the one thing that people have to really come to a conclusion on these things, and that's why I'll post some of that stuff on this Say Something deal. I'll post what I can because it's only 200 words. I wish they would give you more, but they don't do it. So anyhow, that's what we have to deal with, and that's just the way it is. So we have to sit there and comprehend what the law is and what administrative rule is. And see, what you brought up on administrative rule, I want a copy of that because I need that for, that would be a good one that I wish I had to bring up because we could read that tonight, unless you have it in front of you. We could read that tonight so people comprehend that that's what they're claiming they go by. So if they go by and you're out of the system, of their system, then you have to ask them what gives them authority. And so, anyhow, I wanted to start off. That's interesting. Anybody who knows anything about Larry B. Kraft, the lawyer who won the biggest case in the IRS history, proved that there is no law that was ever passed on taxes. It's a voluntary system, as we have discussed many times on this education show, to bring the education from Congress themselves. That way you can hear their own words. We try not to interpret anything because interpret means that you are interpreting something for a wish and prayer and dream. And we're not doing that. We want facts. And that's what the whole point about all this education is, about facts. So anyhow, I'm putting together a deal out for an email for Larry B. Kraft with Ann Von Rice, because Ann Von Rice even came out and said it, how Larry is slandering her because he's telling everybody she's not a judge. Well, in this letter I am putting to Ann herself, with about 60 people too, in this email, and if you would like to be part of the email, let me know, because I'll be emailing this here shortly, because I want to get this out to Ann, because she sat there and said that, people are accusing her of not being a judge. Well, where's her certificate that says she is a judge? Where's her notarized statement that says she's a judge? These questions actually have been asked in the past for her to prove this stuff, and I have never personally seen it myself. And personally, myself, I have questioned it, including verbally to Ann on her own talk show 3 years ago. So this is the one thing that, to bring it up, Ann does a lot of good points, but she never brings anything full circle. It always comes across that she's attempting to keep people in the system per se by the way she does things. And that's my opinion, or what I have read and seen. And so that is the point that coming across to all this stuff is bringing these facts forward. See, when you're going to claim something to the general public, you're going to have to admit to it and prove your evidence to the case of it. And I know, I do this myself when I put my affidavits together. And people say, well, your affidavit don't mean nothing in court. And I've heard that from a few people. recently, and I said, did you file this letter back on that? And they go, well, no, we didn't respond back to it because we just want it to be dead in order. And I said, well, once the court makes a judgment and you're not running back and questioning that judgment and telling that judge you want the judge to prove the judge's words or statement, you want them to prove it. See, it's like, we're going to get into the flag issue here too, but it's like with the flag. We're supposed to have a letter tonight that I promised everybody we have. I don't have it together because I was, anyhow, we'll have it together shortly. We'll get it out to the general public. That's the main point. Because we want these these House of Representatives and congressmen and senators to put in writing what the sign means in the courthouse. And some of them know, some of them are going to freak out, some of them will respond. We do have a letter from a senator or congressman in California, Mays, that, skirted around, but basically said, Executive Order 10834, you can't flag those flags in the court building or the buildings, because those are military flags. And you can call them tribunal, military, or maritime, but it all comes down to the same when you put it in a dictionary words and look and do the research, because it basically all comes down to the same. And so that's the one point that we've got to come across on this. And so, like I said, I'm putting this letter out to Ann and everybody with Larry B. Craft, because if she's going to sit there and say she's an attorney and I'm putting in the letter, prove it. Or judge, prove it. We have a right to know the truth. A lot of people out there take a lot of her writings as gospel. And I'm not going out and attacking Ann or anything. I mean, that's not my point here. It's not a personal attack. It's just saying you're claiming this, so prove it. And so that's not an attack, because if she's saying she's one thing, then she has to prove she is. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so I'm still on Facebook that I know of, but I'll double check here in a minute. Send it, it should be there. Okay, or you can always send it to me in an email real quick, because I don't know why Facebook blocked or whatever it did you're saying. Of course, I've had a little difficulty with Facebook here recently, because some of the stuff I'm posting, they don't want me to post it because I'm posting their new administrative rules. And I did post the structure up what we're going to have on the wheel coming up on Oregon Trackers YouTube, is dealing with the president's right to say who comes in this country. So this has already been through the Constitution. This has been administratively passed already. And that is the Immigration Law 2 of 1952 that even says Muslims are not welcome in this country, because we've been fighting them since, what was the president? Jefferson. So, and you could always read Jefferson's letter dealing with Muslims, and Jefferson was the one who formed the Marines and Navy to fight them. So it's like, do real history. Don't sit there and go that and then say, oh, things have changed over the years, because if you watch real history that's going on in England and these foreign countries with them raping children and forcing their own administrative rules into those states and countries. I mean, even apparently the Swiss government passed administrative rule in their country that you can marry a 12-year-old child. I mean, that's a little ridiculous to me, personally, myself. 12-year-old child has no concept. And then people will sell their children like that, too, in foreign countries. And even in our country, they've been known to sell their children. And it's amazing how people want to go against people that are doing this and bringing out the facts, because they want to protect their own agenda and their own financial means. And we deal with that daily. I mean, we deal with that with the House and Senate. We deal with that with the court systems. And by the way, we have posted up, and I believe we have on new.Oregon Trackers, the law that says if you are a person, you have to pay your court fees, your court administration rules, and if you're a citizen, the courts are free to you. I mean, if you're a capital large citizen, that means a lawful American, the courts are free to you because you're not part of their corporation agenda. And that's the one thing that people have to realize, that these churches, the Vatican, and all these people have their own personalized agenda, basically how they could rape, rob, and steal from us. And that's primarily what they do. They rape, rob, and steal from us. I mean, and it's really humiliating to me when I see these cops taking children into custody. And could you imagine what a child is going through when they're being strip searched at a young age? Because you think that the food stamp and welfare programs, when they put those kids in the state corporation hands, you think they don't get strip searched in their things when they get put in foster care and all this stuff? And if you think that they don't, you're living in another world, because you're not on this planet, I'll tell you that. Because they do get strip searched. Everybody who ends up in those type of positions are in jail. And if you've ever been in jail, you've been strip searched and for a misdemeanor, and that is considered, strip search is considered, and we have the laws too, we posted up and brought it out. That's by their administrative rules that says a strip search for a misdemeanor is rape. So, I mean, it's the one thing that when these men and women don't want to go by their administrative rules, you have to file on them. You really have to file on these men and women for violating the Constitution. You do not use the words "my constitutional rights," because it's not your constitutional rights. It's all equally lawful bloodline Americans. Straight across the board, it's equal. The Constitution, there's no such thing as racism in the Constitution whatsoever. So, and that's the one thing that people need to pay attention to, the Constitution, because the Constitution, there's no such thing as racism. What they do, oh, sticks and stones might break my bones, my names will never hurt me. When are we going to be adults and stand up to this stuff? And quit going along with the hypocrisy that they're doing. I mean, even in some states are telling parents, if your kids don't go through gay and lesbian training at kindergarten and first grade, we're going to press charges on you. And they can't, but people don't know the administrative rules or laws, so they go along with it because they don't know better, because they have supposedly some professional telling them that they don't have these rights. And that is the saddest part about the structure. When people sit there and don't read the administrative rules, they don't study the circumstances of what law is, statute, code, or administration. And remember, basically, when it comes down to, under the Corporate Act, administrative rules are not laws. And so statutes are not laws. Or they are laws by the commercial industry, by USC code, USC 1 codes, 1963 USC. They are administrative codes or laws for them. But knowing how the separation of these things really work compared to what we think they do. Because it's like the one thing that we put out dealing, I just did a talk show Tuesday, dealing with the birth certificate bond. How it works from the Social Security numbers, how it works from, how they register you without your knowledge, or even with your knowledge, because some people register themselves with the state when they do that with their child, and then they don't realize when they register their child, they're giving their authority over the state. And they do. They give their authority over to the state. So when you're saying you're not a responsible parent, and you're saying that parents have authority over you, that's what you're telling the world right there. Because you didn't file to own yourself. So you're claiming that other people have rights over you. And so, I mean, and that's the one thing that we have to come to the real truth on what's going on around us, what's being portrayed to the children out there. And so once we start doing that and we start becoming comprehensive of what they're saying compared to what our truth and knowledge is, then we have some facts. But you have to go by facts first. You cannot go by opinions. It's like I always say, opinions are like diapers, need to be changed regularly. And that is a fact. They need to be changed regularly. That's like when they change the statute codes and administrative rules. They change those regularly on people. And people don't realize that those are administrative rules that apply to elected and public servants, registered church members, registered voters, and all immigrants and illegal immigrants. And not only that, illegal immigrants don't have a right in this country. And that's a fact that we'll run here in a little bit, but under USC code, the president has statutory authority to keep anyone out of the country for any reason he thinks, per 8 USC 1182. So when these people say, oh, we've never been to it, of course you got the 1952 Illegal and Immigration Act. That goes back to 1774 Immigration Act. That originally on immigration, we're supposed to decide in immigration who has legal rights and who doesn't have legal rights, or who has lawful rights and who doesn't have lawful rights in the country. So, I mean, I want to be able to get this out so that way we know who's lawful, who's legal, and so that way the legal immigration has a right to know the truth. When they come in here, they think that they have these rights that bring them in, and they all of a sudden they have constitutional rights. They don't. They have administration statute rights, or technically privileges. So this is the one thing people have got to start focusing on, the truth of what's doing this to themselves and to the rest of us. So that is the one thing that I want to bring to your thoughts on this. Because, like I said, with this letter I'm putting together dealing with B. Kraft and Ann Von Rice, I'm going to quote the federal laws on voluntary taxes, income taxes, and stuff. Even though Ann has some different opinions of taxes. But I want people to realize that taxes is your right and choice. And if you ever fill out a W-2 form, there is a little section that says you claim exempt from taxes. And so that's the point I would like to bring to your attention that we've talked many times on the show. Well, I've read the evidence to you and brought it out to you by the House and Senate and what they say. See, that is the point that when they make these claims and they do this structure against us, this is where we have to write these letters and stand up to these things. Because if you don't put the letters out and stand up to these attacks, and it's like, to me, it's like, you know, when people are saying that taxes are mandatory and all this, most of those people who are telling you mandatory taxes are the people that by law have to pay. You know, I mean, and that's the one thing. I've been having fun. I listened yesterday to the structure what Lars Larson put out to the world on the our representatives that are running for office for the Republican Party. So he brought that out. I thought he did a pretty damn good job of the way he brought it out and the circumstances of the truth that he brought out. And so that is the point. He's brought out some really good points with the campaigns that are running. And to my knowledge, the only one that brought up anything to the structure was the one that they were mainly attacking, stating, because he brought up there is a lawful and legal difference in the structure if you listen to the conversation. And I thought it was shocking because Lars Larson even admitted to that. And I've dealt with Lars on that for years. I've sent him tons of lawful and illegal information disputing everything, even from income tax to property taxes. So, I mean, these men and women do know the circumstances, but you got to realize, you got to step back out of the production, and you have to realize that how many of these people are making a living off the system that we claim? See, that is the point. How many of these people are really making a lawful income or a legal income off of this structure, what they're claiming, what they're doing? And so you got to step out, and I always like stepping out and say, step out from the production, watch the movie. Because if you don't watch the movie and pay attention to what's going on, I mean, it's like apparently there's another $9 trillion or $8 trillion missing out of the budget funds again from the IRS. So where is all this money that the IRS is stealing? Where is all this money going to? Whose pocket, what, why, and how? So, that's the one point, and I've got to work on that stuff. But that is a point to bring forward in these issues of what's going on. Because it's like the thing is that people don't comprehend that human capital, William J. Clinton, Executive Order 13037, March 3rd, 1997. Remember, this is after he gave over Social Security employees' pay, not your pay, but the employees' pay, because they couldn't do it to your pay because Social Security is a constitution structure. It was proven in 1937 by federal court because Social Security is not worldwide. Social Security is for only lawful bloodline Americans only. And so when people start talking about their land or their property and they call it ownership instead of I am the owner. Ownership, that means you're an owner of a ship, so you're liable for that ship and damages and paying when you come to port. So it is learning how the words mean, how they mix things up, how they confuse the issue. So, and that is the one thing that people don't comprehend. They do this for a reason, to keep you confused so that way you don't have the income, and that way you're forced to shell out to them to bring out the truth. That is the one thing. And so it is interesting because, I find it interesting that Anne Von Rice is attacking Larry when all of a sudden she brings out stuff on taxes, but she's wishy-washy on things at times. And so, and I know this for a fact that IRS taxes are voluntary. And I've even proven even letters and evidence that I have on it myself. So, and what she keeps quoting on her stuff is the corporation stuff. And so, and I mean, it's like if you want your taxes to do a 1040X form to file, you can get your taxes back. But, it's further things that is disturbing how these men and women argue back and forth when the law is clear. Income taxes voluntary. The 16th Amendment was never ratified, ever. And Anne's got that in a letter, but I mean, this is the one thing that sort of disturbs me, because she wants to go out and claim that this man is slandering her because she's not a judge. Well, I'm putting in this letter. It's simple, Ann. Let's see a certified copy of your filing as a judge in the Alaska Superior Court. I mean, so that is the one thing I want people to comprehend. This it is so simple for her to sit there and put her oath of office. Make a certified copy proving you are. And that's what I'm sending her right now. And so when you run into these things, you want to ask these people, prove to me what you are. And it's that simple. So once you start arguing with these people and you never get anywhere, but then you sit there and you start writing letters to them, and you start saying, prove this, prove that, like I've even done with the county and the state. And so now that I haven't heard anything back, I've done the appropriate time now to go after the state treasury, and then after that is the state attorney general, and then the House and Senate. And that's my next maneuver coming up. And then when I write those instruments, I'll be making them public. And you guys can review them, make your own opinions, your own thoughts, and see what the facts are. You know, it's simple. You know, there are solutions to these problems instead of arguing about what, why, and how. You know? So, I mean, we got solutions. I mean, I find it amazing where all these men and women want to claim that they're a judge. Well, why the hell would you want to claim yourself as a judge for liability? Hey, that's the one thing that people don't get. You know, prove. It's like a good gentleman says, all right, certify it, prove it to me, certify it, prove it to me. You got their word certify, you know, it is so simple. You know, so certify it. So it's so simple. When you get their information, when they don't certify it, that tells you the truth. When they do certify it, well, then you know something. You know, it's so simple. So, I mean, you know, we have solutions to these issues. It's getting them out there and getting people to comprehend. You know, and that is the whole point. That, you know, I just sent that email out, and so people got that. Oh, shit, now it's telling me it doesn't want to send it. Hopefully I didn't lose it. Okay, I got to go back in and recopy everything and try it another way, because apparently that link is too old. But I'm going to get this sent out here, because people need to know this truth. People need to see the facts that are in front of them, not behind them. And so once people comprehend the facts out, you know, so Larry just got the email on that, so did Ann Von Rice. I want to make it clear that I sent it to her, because I want her to put a certification letter proving that she's saying what she's saying then. She's a last superior judge. Let's just end the arguments, folks. Prove it one way or the other. I mean, you know, that's the one thing. I'm not downing Ann in any way, because I don't know her personally. I've known people that have told me they knew her personally, but like I always ask people, prove it. Give me certification. Give me facts. Because, you know, I could always say one thing and mean another, just like a judge or an attorney does. Or most adults do that to children, and we're not supposed to be doing that to children. You know, it is very interesting that we do the mind control on our children, and then we expect to have these things done to one another. And how are we supposed to fulfill these arguments and do this stuff if we're not willing to stand ourselves on these things? So, and with the birth certificate, I want to get into that here in a minute here. And then I'm going to get into the flag, because I want to do that, and then we'll open up the floor for people, because I know I've talked to a few people. We'll see if they joined us tonight and see if they're going to answer questions. And so that is the one point that I want to bring up tonight, that is getting people to comprehend, because I get messages and emails from people all the time on their problems, just like some of the other fine people out there that do this like I do. You know, a lot of us do this voluntarily, and I always find it interesting when the volunteers are always getting slammed because we're not out there asking for the handout and pay the privilege like some people do. Say, well, you got to pay us before we help you. Well, you know, I've watched a lot of these men and women throughout the years charging people for these things that they're doing, and then people end up going to jail or going through the problems they're having, and it makes you wonder what the truth is. It really does make you wonder what the truth is. So, all right, so it's easier for people just to prove who they are, to make it so that way the truth is out. Because, you know, hang on a second. So, with the truth being out there, we cannot sit there and argue with each other. And it's like I brought up Tuesday. When you get that birth certificate from the hospital, you make sure you got it filed that the hospital cannot register your kid in the state for you. You know, they'll try to do that, but you want to make sure they can't do that. You want to make sure that you leave with the birth certificate, the original birth certificate, not one that they redo and give you another copy of. You know, because now you want the original one, so that way you can file ownership of that ship, that vessel. So that way you are personally owning the vessel. That way it's not registered or regulated to the state privileges. And that's the one thing that people need to comprehend too, that lawful and legal is two different things when it comes down to it. One is Constitution law, and the other one is British statute and codes of administrative rules. And yes, it is British. I don't care what people out there want to try to argue with you and tell you this, that, and the other thing. Read your real history. I mean, even in Washington, D.C., your congressmen don't work for you, the people of the American. They work for the corporation called England. Read the history of Congress. And that even goes back to 1770 before we ended up with the Revolutionary War. Because they were trying to dictate to us then how we were supposed to live by their standards in our country. And that's the same thing that happened to the natives. Because these men and women came from other countries, mainly Spain and England, started doing these treaties with people. And these people that they had treaties with didn't have legal rights to the land in our country. And because when you're native, people look at things differently. And native doesn't mean that it's 100% Indian blood, as what they want to say, because we've had nationalities that have been in this country going back all the way back to the 1600s. But not all of them that are going by a foreign agent structure. They want to live free, interpreted by themselves, so long as that there's no injured party and no property or personal damage or harm to somebody else. And so when you do that, you have rights, not privileges. That means everybody falls under that category if you're lawful. And if you're legal immigration, so long as you're paying your administrative taxes, so long as that you have no personal property damage, they cannot just come after you and write you a citation for traveling with no injured party. And like I said, a lot of this stuff is Superior Court laws. We do have them up on their website, new.org and trackers, because we're quoting what they wrote. They wrote it, we quote it. So we're not quoting opinions or attorneys' opinions. We want the winning court cases, and we're quoting the court cases of administrative rules, what they wrote, that they had to go by the Constitution to prove the Constitution exists. They have people always say, well, the Constitution doesn't belong to you. Well, if you go back in history, if you're born on this soil, yes, it does. And if you're an immigrant, yes, it does, so long as you apply with the Constitution laws of this country. You had to go through that to know the heritage of this country. And most immigrants know more about the heritage of this country than people who have been here for 5 or 10 generations. Because our school systems and our public system has totally failed us. And we know this, because when they started putting in 1968, when they put in the election board, federal school administration board, then they started teaching things and controlling the school and how the funding were going to the school, and they were able to start putting classifications of how funding could be spent that the federal government sent them. And when they do that, when they send you money, it's like interesting, like workman's comp and disability. The House of Senate stole all those lawsuits and the money from that because they hired public employees with that money. Oh, we need more public employees out there doing this, when the disabled and the elderly are getting their funding cut off because they're paying their benefits to retirement. And that's the other thing. Oregon's going through a lot of problems with retirement benefits. Well, where the hell is the COE and the co-pays that these servants pay? Where did the money really go? It's like when I went after Senator Arnie Roebling and I got him to basically, he admitted, when I asked him where the money went for vehicle registration. Because part of that money that went for vehicle registration covers you, uninsured motorists, an uninsured motorist fund. Well, to my comprehension, and I haven't, to my recollection, some of that money went into the PERS retirement fund to pay off some of that structure, and that's illegal for changing the funds from the original structure. Because people didn't have a problem registering their covered wagon or their ship, vessel, when they knew they were covered. And then when they keep doing this and steal the money, it's like on your local water and tax bill. You keep seeing new taxes added up. And see, if they're supposed to pass a tax deal, it has to go to the voters of that community. But there's another danger with that one. Because you got elected and public servants, contractors that make money off the system. And so it's like going to a grand jury of 6 more most times, or even 12. But when you go to a grand jury, you have to make sure that none of these people on that grand jury are elected and public servants or contractors to the state government or the county government, the city government, most of all the federal government. Because how could they make an honest judgment? Because they are making a judgment on you from a jury's point of view. If they are sitting there making a judgment for their own personal financial gain when it really comes down to it. That's horrifying. And like I said, I brought this up with Lars Larson, and we did a talk show on his show about this. I think it was probably 2000 or 2003 when I was questioning, and he brought it up on his show too. And, we had a bit on that, and that was the time I nailed him on IRS income tax, that it was voluntary. I quoted him the law. And then 2 weeks after that, he had several people calling him up, quoting the law. Because people, you want to make sure when somebody says something, you want to make sure it's factual. So this is the one thing that when we come to the conclusion of who's telling us the truth or who's misleading us or for personal gain or whatever, and a lot of people go, well, personal gain, that's what they call that capitalism. Because capitalism is all about me. Well, I don't look at capitalism that way, because if people are that selfish and that greedy, if you got extra food in your home and you see your neighbor that's hungry, I'm not talking about food pantries and all that. I'm talking your physical neighbor. I grew up in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and then in the late 90s, I started watching the shift on this. People used to help each other out, and then all of a sudden, it became the me, me, me society. And that's what we're living today. And that's what they're doing under your birth certificate bond. That's what they're doing when you go into these military, tribunal, kangaroo, maritime court systems. Because that judge is going, me, how much money can I get? And don't forget, a lot of these court cases, when they win, they get a percentage that actually goes into their actual retirement that collects interest. Now, see, I don't comprehend why judges, attorneys, clerks, and all that are in the PERS program whatsoever, because when fines and all this stuff is paid, part of that goes into a retirement fund that has been proven. So if they have their own retirement fund, why are they sitting there able to collect on another one called the PERS? And that affects your birth certificate too, because your birth certificate, they're saying you're registered as a taxpayer. You admit to this instead of voluntary. You're just going ahead and admit to it. And like I was talking to a gentleman today, he was putting a letter in, dealing with a court case, dealing with that. And he's going, under oath, I swear this. And I'm like, why the heck are you putting under oath? You're not committing perjury. You're not in a court case. You're not sworn at this point. And you do that, and the judge sees something, he can come after for you in that writing. You said, I'm doing this under perjury. It's the same thing that when you sign a tax deal, if you actually look at your tax forms, you're signing it under perjury, stating that you made this kind of money. You're making these tax deductible deals under perjury. And you sign that when you do a tax form. And so when you sign that, you are admitting that you are committing a crime one way or the other, technically, because under 12 U.S.C. 411, using debt notes to pay off debts or anything like that, and even paying off income tax, state or federal, including property taxes, which I put that up, Money Mechanics, that if you are doing that, that's actually a federal crime because you can't pay debt with debt. And so people don't realize that when you write a check on these things, when you watch the deal where they call the national debt, that's where the national debt keeps going up because we're using the debt structure in their system. And remember, the British government went bankrupt to we the people March 9th, 1933. We the people didn't go bankrupt. And what happened? They used taxpayers' dollars in 2008 to bail out Obama and everybody else. See, that's the one thing that, once you start putting these pieces together and you step out of the movie and watch the production, it's like a wonderful movie on the court systems I recommend, Interstate 60. It's like you watch, everybody in court knows it's a fraud and a joke, but the attorney goes, how do you expect us to make a living then? If we don't lie, cheat, and steal. Because they can't. Because a judge will tell you, oh, well, you need an attorney. Show me the law, and that's the one thing. Certify the law that says I need one. See, when you get these certifications, and they bring out this point, this is why this one gentleman, brings this stuff up to people all the time. You have to use their words against them. So if they certify it, what are they going to do? Go against the certification? That means the certifier loses their bond and license and goes to jail. That means any other public employee who filed on correctly goes to jail. And people say that, oh, they're exempt. No, they are not exempt. They can tell you a whole bunch of things, and I watch judges and attorneys and people tell people things all the time, and people go, oh, okay, I take it with a grain of salt. I go on my way because they got to be telling me the truth. I just sat here today, was talking to one of my neighbors and explaining some stuff on the system to them. Because, apparently my neighbors have been told a different opinion about me from some of the locals, we'll put it that way. But that's fine. I get what they're telling these people because they don't want people to follow the truth. Because if the city and county and state can't make all this money that they're raping us over from violations, and see, I tie religion to the violations because the courts are run by the Vatican and, by the religion structure. It's like, well, the Bible says you cannot do this, and so we're doing what the Bible says. Well, the Bible is a foreign book written by a foreign country, by foreign people from England and Spain who are not Americans, who are not native, who don't comprehend our laws. Is like, what was that terrorist, Bush, when he did his famous speech. And I remember when he was running for office, and he brought that up when he was running Bush Sr. for president. And we need the law of man. We don't need the law of the jungle. And Guerrilla Radio plays that one a lot, too. And I thank Austin for doing that stuff. Because when he plays that and people go, huh? And it's like people don't realize you want the law of the jungle. Law of man is not there to protect you. Law of man is to sit there and make income from you. The law of the jungle, you get attacked by a tiger or a bear, you're going to shoot it. Or stab it with a stick or a knife or whatever you got to defend yourself. But the rule of law says, oh, you shot and harmed that animal. Now that's considered animal abuse. But remember, under Title 7, 136, Section D, you're an animal. So when they kidnap you and throw you in jail on these things or kidnap your kids under the birth certificate, that's animal abuse. See, it's learning their system how to file their system back to them. So they're committing animal abuse, so they're accepting animal abuse, and they're accepting human trafficking and trade for personal and financial gain. And there's been a dozen judges in the last couple of years have been actually convicted on human trafficking with child cases. And as I say, read these histories. When you see this stuff, collect it. You never know when you could use it, when you need it. And most of all, please watch some of the videos that we've suggested and we got on the website and I put out on the emails and stuff. Watch the videos, especially with your children. I don't care if they're 2 years old. Some of the cartoon videos we did with the system, those work. Kids are going to get into that. So it is bringing the education to your children because your public employees have failed us. And most of them are not even educated properly either because they went through the same schooling that I went through that brainwashed them to go, oh, I'm going to be in this part of the system. I remember, when I was growing up, I was going to be going to law enforcement until I realized when I started getting around it and involved in it and whatever, when I started realizing all it was a case to rape, rob, and pillage from people. There was no justice involved in it. And when people go, well, I want justice in my case. What do you mean you want justice in your case? You expect a foreign agent, 1938 Foreign Agent Registration Act, and remember, always when you put in your letters to these men and women, ask them if they're registered. And you could always send that to the Department of Justice, too. The registration of 1938 Foreign Agent Registration Act, you send it right to that department. If they're not registered, you ask them to be evaluated. So, and if these agencies start getting more and more like this, they're going to start standing up. But it's like I had one senator said to me, Ed, until the people stand up, how the hell do you expect me to defend them when they won't defend themselves? That's why I brought up a wonderful point on the Talk Show Tuesday, is I said, well, okay, you talk about a state representative, a congressman, senator. Aren't they supposed to be your representative for your birth certificate bond? So if they're your representative, you get a traffic court. How come you're not sending a certified letter to your senator or congressman going, you're my representative, you need to go to court and defend me on this? Yeah, point to everything people don't think of. Because if you sit there and you send them a registration letter saying that you're my representative, you're claiming to be my representative under, U.S. 8 1401, the Birth Certificate Act, that says that you are a citizen or national, that you give your rights over to these representatives to represent you. And that has effect when you go into court with these terrorist flags. Because, see, there should be technically flying a American peace flag in these court systems. And the flag that you fly out, that's called the American flag, that's a military flag that was designed by the South dealing with, attacking and murdering Indians. We know that was a perfect conclusion with, Cody and all them. The Buffalo show, I'm trying to remember that. I'll think about it here in a second. Buffalo Bill. So, if you look at the things of what happened in Wounded Knee and all that, these men and women were attacked by foreigners. They weren't Americans. Read your real history of some of these lieutenants and colonels. Some of them were first born on this soil. Doesn't give them rights. Okay, because they're not native. They weren't born here. They didn't come from generations from this soil. They came from generations of a foreign country. And everybody goes, well, we're a world, and the Bible says that we need to protect the world and all. No. The United States was never set up to protect the world. Because if we were set up that way, and if you honor your constitutional oath and your rights, the rest of the world will straighten itself out. But the churches cannot do that because the churches need that income for you to sit there and go, oh, you could buy your way to heaven. Oh, you did this? Well, throw some money to the church, and we'll ask God to forgive you and that stuff. It's the same thing what King John did in the Bible to the Pope of the Treaty of 1213, the Magna Carta of 1215. True story on that is John was raped, robbing, and murdering, just like a lot of your public servants do today, under God's name, the Bible, under God's name. And I've heard that from them themselves. Said the Bible says this, and this is what the Bible is, and that's the law. And it's like, no. No offense to people that believe in your religion. I'm not slamming you on your religion because we all have a right to believe what we want. But when you cause personal and property damage and harm, physical, personal, even sometimes real emotional harm, it's not like calling somebody a name because sticks and stones may break my bones, and, we all know that story. But that's where we have to start when we become adults, start acting like adults instead of like spoiled little children like a lot of people do today. Like Maxine Waters, Senator Maxine Waters down in California, Senator Pelosi, Feinstein. You know, I still cannot believe that the people in those states are still putting these people in office. You know, that's why it's so apparent to check the election vote. We had that with Donald Trump, and people were still going, oh, but, you know, it's like you got to realize that immigrants, illegal or legal immigrants, technically can't even vote. Because if you go back in the structure of the 1850s when they started allowing votes after the Civil War, it clearly states that the only one who could vote is the property owner. Okay, so that means a woman could not vote unless the man died and she inherited the property. Now she's the owner of the property because every property owner is entitled to one vote. That's the original structure. Then they say, oh, now we've got passed it so women can vote. Well, you know, I mean, if men were paying attention, you know, back then, if you harmed a woman, you had to be worried about waking up the next morning, too. You know, so a lot of those things really did happen back in the 1800s, the 1700s, or even the early 1900s, even to the mid-1900s, possibly some today, where a guy, you know, is mistreating a woman, and shit happens. You can't blame a woman for standing up who's getting tired of really getting physically abused. You know, even emotionally abusive to a degree. But, you know, women, you know, sometimes get more emotion than they do what they call logic or common, or I don't like using common sense because common goes back to England. Everybody goes, common law. Well, common law is what a judge decides. So that's the one thing. Do your research on common law. Actually research the actual law through Congress and in England of common law. Common law didn't come into effect technically until the 13th century. Or 1300s, I mean. And that was common under the lawyers for the king. That was dictated through Christian, and that goes back to the Christian Crusades, where the pastor was the judge over the court case of religion. It wasn't a judge, it was one of those pastors or religious men. So it's looking at the history of how we've got from there to here, and like with the birth certificate, how it affects the courtroom when you go into courtroom, because the judge is looking you as a slave, as a citizen, or excuse me, or a national, and that's the way they look at you. And people like one gentleman I was talking to yesterday, and he went to a court case, and he's going in there and he goes, I told the judge about jurisdiction, and I told him this, and I told him that in the courtroom. And I said, don't you comprehend when you talk in court, that's hearsay? Did you file anything when you went to court to prove it? Do you have it certified by the clerk? Do you have a clerk copy, at least a copy from the clerk that you, at least her stamp is on it? And he goes, no, why should I do that? And I said, well, you going in, you got hearsay. Well, I got the audio and videotapes from the court that mean anything. Well, it's putting it together so it correctly has a standing in a court. And a lot of that stuff, when they do that, and trust me, I've audio taped my own court hearings. And I have taken the court videotapes and gone through that. And you'll see through the court videotapes where it's not edited, it's dropped out. You'll have a piece where there's nothing there, and all of a sudden it comes back into the conversation. And that's why these judges don't want you to bring an audio and videotape in the courtroom. They say, we do it, it's all right. No, you are even a citizen or national. You're still going into a foreign court under their regulations. You have a right to audio and videotape. Supreme Court has stated that many times. Then other lower courts have gone against it. And that's what I'm telling people. If you get an information from a judge like that or an opinion, remember, when they send you letters, those are opinions. You want them to quote the law. You know, put it in writing back to them. Would you quote me the law on this? Would you quote me the ORS and certify the ORS? Or, you know, whatever state you are, administrative rules. Certify the administrative rules. And then you got them on that one because they can't certify administrative rules because they're copyrighted by the state corporation. I mean, it's stepping out and looking at all these things that are going on. And I bring this stuff up, and a lot of other good men and women out there are bringing it up. And we watch a lot of other people bring this stuff up, telling people if you don't pay this and if you don't file this and you don't do this, you're going to jail or you're going to be in trouble. And I've gone after them, trying to get them to come. Hey, come on our show. We'll bring you in. We'll have your opinion. And people will decline because I want them to bring their words in, and I've asked a lot of people to send me the information to prove their words. Just like the email I sent out dealing with Larry Beecraft and Von Rice. Because, I've had difficulties with that when Bruce and everybody else got charged. And when Bruce and everybody else got charged, the Continental Marshals and the Continental Judges, Ann was with them all when all this started. And then all of a sudden, when they got charged and they're going to jail, she writes a public letter separating herself from Mike and everybody on this stuff. Hamilton is bringing up Mike Hamill. So she's separating herself from all these people that, what I heard, that she was the one that was not only help educating, she was part of them. And then all of a sudden the shit hits the fan and she puts out a public letter, which most of us got in Facebook or emails, separating herself before even the trial started happening with Bruce. And I heard, I watched John Lamb's videotape when he was out there in Colorado where they had the actual peace flag in the courtroom, which shocked everybody. But they were an administrative court of Article 1 of legislative court for the state corporation. They didn't take it to an Article 3 federal court. And that is the most interesting thing, too, when you start separating and you realize we've got that. And, of course, don't forget, you've got, 11 other courts? You got bankruptcy court. You got the complaint process of a court. It's knowing when you go into even your partnership with somebody in a business, they have those type of courts. So there's more than one court, and you need to know what court you need to be in if you're going to play their administrative game, so you need to know what court and how to file in their court. And so that's the one thing, when you get a traffic violation or something like this, you ask them for jurisdiction, certify it, and ask them what court they're doing. And the other thing is ask them what flag they're going to fly in that courtroom. And I do recommend, it's like Mike has brought up, another Mike, walk in with the peace flag when you go into court. You got the peace flag tattooed on your shirt, or sewn on your shirt. You got an actual flag, you're walking in with the peace flag. You're under this jurisdiction. So, these are points that to bring out that we need to start educating each other, working with each other. And as soon as I get that email for the template for the flag, because I had one, and Mike's going to bring up one too. So I said, all right, Mike, well, let's run with yours. So I haven't got it. He's been busy this week too with a lot of things too that, sometimes there's not enough hours in a day, as we all know. So, as soon as I get that, we'll get that up and post it up on the wall and get it out for everybody too. Because once we can start getting that, and people in your states, ask your senators, even write your mayors and city councils. Ask them the definition of the flag that they're flying in the city council buildings. Because I'm going to be doing that too. I plan on emailing all the city and county attorneys to ask them the definition of the flag. So I have to say too, that's going to be 300-400 emails I'll be putting out here in the next week on this. And we'll see what kind of response I get. So, I figured that there'll be some response. Most might not respond to it because most of them don't want to put themselves in a liability issue. But then you got those honest men and women that will respond honestly. And then that way, oh, that's right. Their immunity starts there because they prove. Because, see, they do have immunity only if they're standing by the Constitution. Statute Codes and Administration of British, what do they call that? The register, basically all attorneys are registered to the King and Queen of England. Okay, and that's the one thing that you can type in. Even, what was that, August 17th or 27th, 1887, when the American Bar Association was formed, it even says in it that lawyers are reliable to the British Crown. They are registered to the King and Queen of England. And that goes back to 1300s, where England created attorneys and bars. So, I mean, and that's the point, real history. We don't get taught real history in our schools, in our public structure anymore. And remember, when these city attorneys and these mayors and city councils, you know, a lot of them go by, you know, they get away with, people would say, bribery. They get away with a lot of that because it depends on how much money these other people are donating to their campaign funding. I don't know if people recall that until the 1980s, there was no basic campaign funding out there. The local TVs and radio stations used to run televised campaign structures free to the general public because that's how they used to write it off in their taxes to the FCC. And then in the 1980s, late 80s and 90s is when it really started changing, where contributions started coming in. And then all of a sudden you had to pay for the advertisements in the paper. You had to pay for the advertisements on radio and TV when all those used to be what they call public service announcements. Public service announcements, even in your paper, if you write that, they're supposed to be free to publish. And I've done that many times, hundreds of times. And I've seen them published under public service announcements. But now the way politics has got where it's opened up in such a UCC 1 of 1963 under Commercial Act, that's where they're saying, well, now you have to pay the privilege. But it's proving this stuff, you know, because it's like, I mean, I've emailed my filings even with Linda Pilson to the local media, the Oregonian, and asked them, I've asked her to certify it. Here's Oregon state law that says this about taxes. Here's Oregon state administrative rule says you don't have to register your manufactured homes or your homes with the state. I'm quoting the law of your administrative rules to you. So, and I'm not getting a response to that because I wanted a certified letter who registered my structure in their tax structure because I never did it. I remember the day after, was it a week after I put my manufactured home up, I had this guy claiming to knock on my door. I'm a Lincoln County tax assessor, and I need to assess your property and your values. And could I come in your home and assess? And that's what he said too. Could I come in and assess your property and your home? That's why you never ever. I don't give a damn if it's a judge, caseworker, cop. You don't bring them in your home. You know, the minute you invite them into your home, you're open game. You lost your rights because you said, come on in. And, you know, that's the one thing that, you know, people don't realize because they think sometimes these people are, we've been programmed to think by TV. We've been programmed to think by radio. We've been programmed by wrong, dishonest ministers and preachers out there in the system of these people. Not to question him. It's like, what is that, Romans 13.14 says, thou shalt do what the government tells me to do. The government is basically, he takes the orders from God. So your public employees, when they write these administrative laws up and these contracts, they're saying God told them to do this stuff, and God's there to protect you. But when you're sitting in a jail cell, hey, God, what happened? Where are you? You start realizing a little bit more reality in those circumstances, including when you get kidnapped and held for ransom for violation, so that way they can bill the jail system. And remember, most of your jails in this country are private jails under a corporation of a foreign government. And even your county commissioners sign contracts with these jails to make sure that the jail keeps up so many of these kidnapped people in their jails versus criminals. I mean, you know, real criminals. Because, I mean, you'll have a judge or cop will tell you, the judge will tell you, well, you ran a stop sign. That's a criminal offense. Under whose law? Oh, that's right. Your law says, but if I want to go by God's law, what is God's law? Of course, I don't go by God. I go by the Creator. So by the Creator's rules, under the law of the jungle, did I harm anybody? No. No personal property damage. And I've said this in court too when I've been in it. Bring the injured party forward. You have to bring an injured party forward or else this case cannot go forward. I've got this on YouTube videos too.
And where I'm telling the judge off because they brought me in supposedly for a probation violation when they kidnapped me and held me for ransom for telling them they could serve a warrant by a judge, because a warrant technically, and I put that out too, has to be signed by a grand jury. A judge cannot sign a warrant unless it's on elected and public official, registered taxpayer, I don't know, immigration, because you're a corporation member. You're not a real living man or woman by their standards or their administrative rules. So it is putting these things together to bring this fact in to know when you're going to these Article 1 courts, knowing how to address the courts and your instruments. And remember, when they call it a docket number, that's when a ship docks into port that has to pay, what is that, tariff fees? So when they come into port, and that's when you go in, you got a docket number, so you're docked there. So they're trying to figure out how much money that you have to pay to go through their process to come in what they call their foreign country. And that's why I do recommend people read thoroughly the 1938 Foreign Agent Registration Act. The reason why that came in was because of World War II. That brought that in, so all foreign agents had to be registered. All immigrants have to be registered. Legal immigrants have to be registered with it. And then you got these people like Maxine and, Boxer and Pelosi and all these congressmen asking for $18 billion so we could pay all these terrorists and illegal immigrants medical costs. Well, we're going to take that $18 billion from Social Security paying the disabled and elderly, and we're going to take that $18 billion that the hospitals write off for indigent people, or what they call indigent, instead of writing it off on the birth certificate bond like they're supposed to do for lawful Americans. I mean, we even got a letter that they put out a year ago May now, that John Kitzhaber, former Oregon State governor, even admitted why Kate Brown, in a newspaper article, why she didn't write off $1.8 billion on the birth certificate bond. And these doctors know this stuff. They know it's true because they're registering to keep you in it, so that way they get their big paychecks. Because if you look back in history, going back to the 1980s, your local administrative court judge used to get paid on the average of $3,700 a year. That was it, with 100% medical, dental, and burial fees for him and his direct family members only. And then they started changing and getting away from the PERS system that they call back then and changed it to these new contracts that they were supposed to save all these monies. It's like Blue Cross Blue Shield is a good example. They pay their doctors a minimum of $40,000 a year to give people vaccinations. They're paid to poison us. Do they care? No, most of these doctors don't care. They care about the money, the root of all evil. That's the one thing about, people don't read the Bible. The money is the root of all evil. So, but I mean, this is the point that bring it out to the point of when you go in and you get a birth certificate, and then when you don't claim that birth certificate ownership and the state controls it, then they can bring you back into the state court system to regulate your privilege to live. And that's what they're doing. I went to the Oregon Pain Center last week, and I got denied for medical pain medication because I was not registered with the state of Oregon. I didn't have their corporation ID, and seeing that I don't have their corporation ID, they're telling me I'm not entitled to pain management programs or stuff. Well, even the state law says you don't need ID so long as you're lawful in this country. But the way the one individual told me, we don't care about that. We're going by our corporations overrule the Constitution, exactly what the kid told me on the phone. And I said, well, that's interesting because doctors are not registered and licensed. So they don't have a corporation right or a constitution right. That's been proven in court because I even got the court case that says they can't deny you for pain medication. So, and that was even in Oregon they did that. So that's the thing that always gets to me. It's like Oregon's right to life. Who has the right to life? Everybody goes to the baby, the pregnant mom. You can't have an abortion. Now we got religion telling you to dictate to your body what you're going to do. People are telling you how to live your life through somebody else's religious point of view. And people get upset that they pass this rule. Why would a woman want to bring a child into this hell that we're living? It's no different than Nazi Germany. We are living the same as they did in Nazi Germany, England. You do something wrong, a cop feels the right to break a window out or shoot you or tase you. Walking down the street, 13-year-old kid, cop comes out and asks the kid, what are you walking down the street for? He goes, this is none of your business. He pulls out his taser and tases the kid. And he's telling the kid, you don't question what I ask you. You tell me what I ask you. Oh, I mean, and you're telling me that's no different than Nazi Germany? And they're shooting people on the street today because of traffic violations? They're not criminals. You know, you ran a stop sign. You didn't hit nobody. You didn't cause personal property damage. And then they're shooting you because of that? This is what's really going on.
And
So when they bring you from your birth certificate registration to the state, because when you register your birth certificate with the state, your parents are banning you to the state, and after 30 days you don't claim after a child's born. After 30 days you don't claim that child. The state takes liability issue as they claim. And these are administrative rules. I've posted them up there. I've proven this stuff. And they say, all right, now your kid belongs to the state. We can dictate to you how you're going to educate your kids. We're going to dictate to you if your kids don't go to school, we're going to put you in jail and punish you. Your kids do something wrong in school, we're going to fine you and punish you because you didn't beat your child into submission to be programmed. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, yeah, I can't forget that one. Yes, thank you. That's a good one. I put that up. Yeah, I put the video. I think it was a Tennessee patrolman. A groundhog is running around on a highway. And so he's trying to get the groundhog, apparently trying to go back in the bushes. And so he's going after the groundhog in an aggressive manner, realistically, when you watch the video. So the groundhog just starts turning around and going to defend himself. So the cop runs across the street, and the groundhog starts chasing him across the street because he's defending his territory. The street was not there when his great-grandparents were born. You know, he's an animal. He's, under the definition. So when his elders were born 125 years ago, that highway wasn't there. So he's going by his instinctive area, like what they call by salmon, because salmon swims up the river that they know the scent from. When they left the river, they know the contamination of that river, so they come back to it. But this trooper brings out his gun and shoots this groundhog twice. And the comments have been very comical, too, with some of the ones that came back on Facebook on it. But, this guy just proved that he would shoot your own child. Because, see, if he sat there and didn't have authority, which he doesn't, why wasn't animal control called in? Why wasn't there a cage put out there? Feed the animal, put him in a cage, and relocate him. Okay, we already got these so-called systems in place like this. How come the public servant is not being arrested for shooting a groundhog out of season? They have groundhog seasons. Just like fishing seasons and everything else, or they call it recreation. I don't use the word recreation because that's a foreign British terminology for like vacation is a privilege to go have time off and to do stuff. But the man should have been charged for violation to animal abuse right there. It happened. It's done. Who could prove against it? Nobody. You got the video right there where he admits to it. This is the one thing that people, need to file when they see these things. Question it. I mean, we've got, and I would like to personally thank the people out there who been watching some of these court cases and some of these emails by these cops violating people's rights. And your phone calls really don't help. To a degree, it does. They go by your phone calls. But the thing that really helps if you put a letter to them and quoting their own state and federal laws to them of what they can and cannot do. Quoting their words to them, that does a lot better, because on a phone call, hey, that could be considered hearsay. They only recorded conversations that they want to try to come up with criminal charges on somebody that they think they could go after. So, and that's what they try to do, is they get you to admit different things, including when you call 911. Commit to things that have happened. I mean, it's like really disturbing to me when people would call up because they've got mentally ill children that react, and cops will drive up and shoot them. Then they go, well, I didn't know that they were mentally ill. It says it right on the computer before it gets there. And let me tell you something. They lie to you, because that computer brings up your medical and everything. They know everything, because they have to have that information online, because if they don't have that information and they pull out with certain public officials or something like that and they harm them, they're liable, and they know it. So, I mean, when they sit there and tell you they don't know this rule or that regulation, they lie. And if they truly don't know, present them with them and say, all right, now I want you to certify me yours is more powerful than the Supreme Court. I want you to certify this to me. Say, I want your signature stating that you're backing this part up, admitting to this part. And when they put their signature, to John Henry, remember, there's a difference between autograph and signature, even though I have been enlightened that in Black Law Dictionary, autograph and signature are similar to the same thing. But at the other point, signatures, technically, you're not supposed to have value. They're dead man hands, and autographs do, because people pay for an autograph, but they won't pay for somebody's signature. I mean, it's called an autograph. When you go back and you watch different programs, even, what is the one that I like watching, Antique Roadshow times. They even talk about the autograph. They don't talk about a signature on these old books and stuff. And so it is paying attention to wordings and how people are clearly stating things and realizing what they're stating to you, because words matter more than people even imagine. I mean, I grew up for years. When somebody said something to me, it didn't really get rolled over on me until the day that I realized, oh, shit, man, that word actually means this. It didn't mean what I thought it did. And remember, there are crafty people that know how to use words very well. They'll make you sound like you're the best man in the world or best woman in the world. But if you'd ever do the research of some of the words they use, you realize they just slammed you and called you a doggy, dirty scum of the street. But people think that a lot of these people use these fancy words and they appraise them, but you got to do the research on the fancy words and what they mean. So anyhow, I'm going to get ready to open up the floor. We're going to say who would like to bring in stuff. I try to get some information to people that were going through some issues. Hopefully they'll call in tonight. Because it's like I want to bring some of these issues, what they're going through, forward. Because when we're going through these issues, we need to know what you're going through. You need to know what we're going through. And we have to come up with the solutions to these issues that we're being forced into. I mean, I've had judges that told me, you didn't sign that release form from the jail the way I wanted you to sign it. What do you mean you want me to sign the form under your orders? That's a court order. You sign the way I tell you what your release is. And I was lucky. I had about 3 times where the sheriff deputy goes, you don't have to sign this if you don't want to, Ed. And I said, yeah, I know that. And so, I mean, I expected him to, if you don't sign it, whatever. Hey, I have one that I even wrote on the 2 jail receipts that I wrote on it. They kidnapped me, held me for ransom, threatened my life, tried to murder me, and they certified it too. I have that certified, notarized. So, I mean, these are things that you want when you get out of jail. You want to be able to put those things. If you have to sign that, they want you to sign the paperwork this way when you're out of jail. I sign it under duress. Okay? That's the one word you always want to use on their paperwork. And also, too, I-207 and I-308. People say that doesn't matter on it, but I always like to include both because I-207 was the original one, and then they altered the I-207 in 1980s or 90s. I think it was Clinton that did that. So when they did that, they took away part of the original I-207. So it is watching and knowing how these things administratively work, because you got to remember these are administrative courts. It's like when you walk into a city and you're paying your water bill, that's administration. You go in electricity, pay your electricity bill, that's administration. So, but we're working on some plates on that one, and Rod Class has got a good one on utilities. I've read his. I plan on using something similar, but I plan on adding a couple more things into it. Because, see, they can't, for lawful Americans or legal Americans, mainly lawful, they can't sit there and take off your electricity or this stuff because that can kill you. Your water, that could kill you. The Constitution says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So without food and water, how are you supposed to be happy? Just some points that people don't bring up or really think about. And then judges and attorneys will tell you, well, you're not entitled to that because the Constitution says that, but that's not what it means. Well, what does happiness mean to you then? What does liberty mean? Because when liberty, you get off a ship, and when you come back on a ship, you're under the captain's rules. And if you're off on liberty and you're not there under a captain's ship, then what rules are you going by? Law of the jungle, Mother Nature's. So these are things to look at. These are things to, look at, bring forward, bring to a positive structure. These are things that we all have to look at and bring to. Because if we don't look at them and bring to ourselves in this structure, how are we supposed to have a future? How are we supposed to raise the children? How's this country supposed to have a future if it's not brought up that way? I mean, these are things we need to do. But anyhow, I want to open up the floor, bring in some comments, see where we're at tonight. And it is interesting because I'm going to be starting doing, some more talk shows coming up on the birth certificate and walking through that with some people because I've talked to many of these people for years. And now all of a sudden they're starting to comprehend what I've been saying for years about what the wording is.
All participants are unmuted.
So the floor is open. Anybody would like to speak up? The floor is yours. So we got nobody who wants to speak up. Okay. Nobody at this point. Okay. Well, that's all right. And so, it's getting into this. So I'll read a couple things here of the law, or actually what they call law, administrative rules. So that legal name, and this is what I tell anybody, you get a traffic ticket or anything like that, file identity theft on them. A legal name is identity theft, but only used by lawyers, judges, undisclosed conversations by us of patrons or patients. And see, you got to realize when you give your doctor information on you, they could use that in a court of law. Because the doctor works for the court system. Remember, he issued you the birth certificate bond, the corporation did. And so by that, they're keeping you in their corporation, in their paperwork. And that's why you've got to realize that when you file these paperwork on your children and these things to bring this stuff forward, and if you want a copy of my thing, I do have it at most of the places on some of the old Past Oregon Trackers YouTube channels. But I have this large C citizen structure of the 14th Amendment. They wrote it. We quote it. So, and then the other point, too, is that, I did put up a new video up from Lion News. It's a 2011 structure, but he's got some good information. File a claim against crooked cops and lawyers and judges. And that's the point. You have the right to file your claims on these men and women for RICO Act using public funding to racketeer, conspiracy, and steal money from you. And see, you're quoting their own laws because, and I'll read this again, and I'll bring this one out because USC Code 8, 1401 says that you are a citizen or national of the United States at birth. So what happens when you take a ship out of moored that just came out from being built from the ground up? That's called birth. Then they have a manufactured state of origin where the, I'll say baby was born or the child. Yeah, so that is the one thing to look at these things of how these things work. You know, because Executive Order 2040 from Eisenhower, or not Eisenhower, brain fart, Executive Order 2040 was put into place because it was put in under the March 9th, 1933 Bankruptcy Act to produce and to claim everybody as a corporation that was birthed by the state of whatever state, registered, and when you register with the state, remember the states are registered with the British government under corporations. So that is the one thing to put these things into place of how these things work compared to, like I said, our schools teach us. I mean, most of us realize that Columbus never even came to this country, and then they talk to about Columbus is our founding structure. He came and discovered America. What did he discover? Anybody thought to ask that question? What did he discover? I've never seen anything that he came and discovered anything in our country. You know, I've never seen it. Has anybody else seen it? No. And that's the one thing, a British auxiliary registration, accreditation to the King and Queen of England. You know, that's where your judges and all these people are in the Crown Temple. You know, that even goes by the Crown Temple of the Vatican, the church structures and all that. Because remember, all the churches have to register with the Vatican. All religions have to register with them. So, you know, these are things to bring out, and realizing that when Roosevelt put this executive order in, remember, Roosevelt was not a friend of this country. Neither was Winston Churchill. You know, they were back then, everybody got paid off. Nobody could track anything because we didn't have the mass media like we do today. So, I mean, and that's one thing that people have got to correlate, you know. And I see this more and more with other people's websites, too, that I see, because I've been preaching this stuff for years. So there's a lot of other good men and women like myself bringing this stuff out to the people. Because if you don't speak out, how are you supposed to speak out for yourself or your children? I mean, and that's the one thing. People say, well, silence, you admitted to silence, so you didn't speak up. Well, sometimes silence is blessed and sometimes it's not, but knowing at a time when somebody says you're silent, you need to speak up. And don't forget, under the Trading with the Enemy Act, the 12 U.S.C. 95B, and this is where most people fall into this, because when you're trading with the enemy, and that's using even debt notes back and forth, and people do go to jail for this stuff, but it's not publicly known, because when you're sitting there with a lawyer that's supposed to be defending you, and you think that these people are doing the right things, and you find out, you know, it's a joke. You know, it's like the 14th Amendment. You know, it was never ratified. It was passed by administrative rule of Congress. But if you read the contract of this country has with these people, the Constitution says that they have to have 2/3 of the majority vote. So if you have 3 million people in your state or your territory, whatever you want to call it, okay, capital C or lower C state, 2/3 of the citizens have to vote to do that. And if you only got 1/3 of the voters out there participating, you can't pass anything. Because you already know those 1/3, or most of them, are government employees trying to keep their pensions and everything else rolling off it. And I know, because when I was 18 years old, I ended up with a government job, and I was looking at retiring in 20 years with my pension. I mean, I was going to keep my mouth shut. I figured I'd do that. You know, I'd go buy some land up on the river, and be at when I retire. I mean, I could be out of the system and all that stuff. So, you know, so that's the one thing that people don't realize. I mean, you know, your public employees and all these people going against gun control. They've spent over $4.5 or $7 billion for gun control. It's like you're wondering what this kid is making for what he's doing going after this shooting in Florida. Who is backing him financially? Why is all the news media making a star out of him going against arm rights when people don't have a concept of what the true arm rights are, and they don't realize what the Second Amendment means? And people say, oh, well, they never meant machine guns or what they call, assault weapons. Well, a weapon can't assault you. Only a man or a woman can assault you. You can't give an inanimate physical name for something it didn't do. So, I mean, and that's the thing that is so frustrating, that people don't realize that even your taxpayers' dollars that you call have gone in to fund gun control. And it's illegal for them to use funding like that. You know, and so when people start doing this, it's time for us, we the people, to speak out on these issues, to bring these issues forward on the plate. So, I mean, do we have anybody that would like to speak up? Okay, well, we'll just continue in that fashion then. Saying that people don't want to speak up, we won't argue that one tonight. But like I said, I'll get this letter out. We'll have it out by next week. That'll be a guarantee. We'll have that out next week because we got to get this one out for the flag for the general public. Because as soon as we get this out to the public and start getting them to stand up, and you start writing your legislators and ask them what the circumstances of these things mean. Ask them to prove what the flag means in their buildings or what they're flying in their office. Ask them what flag they are flying in their office, too. So we'll have something that's just going to be a short paragraph up so we can get out, because I'm eager to get this one emailed out to what I'm fighting. You know, so I mean, that's the one thing. I want to get this stuff out for me as well. Because, I mean, I'm fighting this battle with you guys as well as we all fight in this battle. And so how is this supposed to come up? You know, that is the one point. How are we supposed to make sure that we know the difference? And so we are waking up across the country. People are waking up and standing up to these issues. So, and this is a real fact that we have to defend our homes or children. And by the way, I do have administrative rules I got to find back where they can't even take your land for property taxes, but I do have laws that say that, you know, the man's house is a castle and they can't take your land. But I do actually have congressional records somewhere I got to find again where it was a congressional record they can't property tax you. And I got to find that. I had that up one day, was reading it, and it disappeared when I was reading it. So that sort of gets to me. I should have saved it before I went any further, but sometimes we don't think about those things. We think they're going to be there. It's like when people put attachments on your Facebook wall and there's a good argument or article, sometimes we don't save that. So we miss out on those things. So when we save it, we always got to save stuff for record. And, you know, I mean, and flash drives do work, because if your computer goes down, you know, then that way you have further evidence on what you're going through. So anyhow, I got to get a hold of a few other people tonight too, because we got people that are bringing letters in that, you know, it's like, you know, it's really interesting because, and people have to realize before you can file a commercial lien on a public servant, we're still debating that one too, but before you file a lien, you have to make sure that you proved how they injured you. Because you can't just file a commercial lien on somebody without an actual injury. You know, so, I mean, and now, I mean, I just got this from Dave that, they passed a new administrative rule that says cops have the same similar hate crime rights as victims do. This is getting ridiculous, that these things, but remember, this is administrative rules. And so when you do file your paperwork, you want to make sure your local police department gets it, your mayor, your city council. And you want to ask them if they speak against it to certify a letter to you to prove their point that it is. You want them to prove by certification. And if you don't, then the law stands, and you make sure that it is. And then if you get a chance, you want to make sure it's public at one of their meetings. Trust me, I've got videotape where I started addressing that, where they're threatening me to arrest me because, that's the one thing that really got to me, is that they were going after attack me when I was asking it. They had a cop that was trying to arrest me in the city council meeting, threatening me. And this is on YouTube video. And then 10 days later, he resigned and left the county. Because he knew it was wrong. I mean, some of these guys, I give them the benefit of the doubt. They might not know. But then I have to realize that these men and women do know, because it is part of the training they get. And you have to realize that this is training they get when they go through these programs. And people say, well, I wasn't trained that in school. I wasn't trained that as a cop. Well, you're telling me that you have a Constitution oath that you took, and then you take a city ordinance oath, too. Because remember, they take an oath to the Constitution, and then they take an oath to the corporation. And then you have to be able to decipher what oath they took. It's like when I asked the county clerk here in Lincoln County, I put in the Oregon State Administrative Rule oath that they take too, and I put in the Oregon State Constitution oath that they're supposed to take too. And so I asked her, who does she belong to, the Constitution, or does she belong to administrative rules? So that is the one thing that people have to realize on these structures of what they're doing. And when you file, it's like people go after the marijuana issue or the hemp issue, whatever you want to call it. And it's like, come on, people, why are you arguing about something that what the Great Spirit or God gave us? You got even plants in your backyard that are liquid morphine, wild plants that grow up that have liquid morphine in the plant, the weed itself. And so that's the one thing that people do not look at this. They don't do the research because we're not properly educated in responsibilities. All these people, why my family OD'd on drugs? Well, then they read the label prescription. Why do they take 5 Vicodin in 20 minutes? And then you're wondering why that is not an overdose, because it only says 1 every 2 hours, 4 hours. Because your body system is a chemical structure, and it only handles what it can handle. And each and every body, male and female, including children, their structure is totally different, so their body reacts differently to the medications. And so that way, I would always say to people, research, do your structure, figure out what the truth is. And once you got the truth, let them argue about their own administrative rules with themselves. So the main thing is that if you have a newborn, I suggest that, by law, you don't have to take a birth certificate. That is a fact. But also, too, Social Security has a Form 402 that I brought up on it that says it's exempt form from Social Security. 4029 is application for exempt from Social Security and Medicare taxes and all that. They actually do have forms for you not to participate in these programs in their system. So we suggest that you look at these things and take a positive note. It's like now all of a sudden Trump is going to go legalize hemp or pot across the 48 states. Because Alaska and Hawaii are corporation members. They are not the Civil War structure of the original contracts we have with the British government and the Vatican. And that's the one thing you got to realize: the 1871 contract we got with the British government is from the Vatican as well. There is no difference. Because remember, the Queen or the King have to do what the Pope tells them to do, because that's part of the treaty that they honor going back to 1213 with the King, King John, that's in the Bible. So it is bringing this stuff out, bringing their structure to the table to them. And like I said, the other point is when they start violating their oath, file on it. And you have to know the correct wording to do it. You violated my oath. How? You violated my rights. How? You just say you cannot do that. And also, too, yeah, that's true, too. Capitalism does make your name in all caps. Because if you want that, you have to do that. So, but anyhow, seeing that we got no one to speak up tonight, I'm going to quit running on here. I'm going to let other people have the rest of the evening off, because we'll take it and I'll get some of the other work I need to get done and some of the other phone calls I need to make. So we need to make sure that brings out to the circumstances. So I will bring that up so that way we don't have conflict of interest. So anyhow, with that, I will... What I like to say, may the Great Spirit look over you. May Mother feed you, bring up the circumstances to you. And may the Creator look over you. And whatever your religious belief is, remember, it is your religious belief. It doesn't mean everybody else goes by your religion. Because my religion is the religion to me is the Constitution. That's my religious belief. And I go by native structure. And so, and that's the one thing, I put that email, and I like to end before I hit the ending here, with the structure for Ann von Ritz and dealing with Larry. Ann does come out with some interesting things. Some are good, some are questionable. So if she's doing this, we want to see publicly, I'm making a statement right now. Prove to us that you have a certification that you were a legal judge. Prove it. Because to my comprehension, most of the judges have to be lawyers before they can become judged by administrative rules to take a seat. So what was your bar license? People want to see this stuff. Because we get all these people claiming, I'm a judge. Well, where's the proof? Because the only one who can give you a title of nobility is Congress. And if you're a judge, then you have a title of nobility of Congress. And so that way you're separated from the rest of the world, rest of the living Americans. So, that is the point. What is common sense? If everybody's common and they believe that one religion is superseding another religion, that's common sense. That's why it was written, so that way all had to be equal. That way the Constitution cannot describe skin color or religious belief. So with that, may the Great Spirit look over you, and you all have a blissful evening. And don't forget to look up. This is the one thing I want you folks to realize. Our court system has been illegal for 81 years. And there's a judge that came out and stated this. And not only did she come out and state this, she was the former legal counsel for the Exchange Commission. That's Mary Jo White, former United States attorney from New York, and even admitted to the fraud publicly from the Securities and Exchange Commission that she was a ruling judge. So anyhow, with that, you all have a blissful evening.
Well, thank you, Ed. Side note, as I had asked Ed earlier, capitalism. Maybe making your name in all caps is part of their capitalism. Once they make it all in caps, that basically makes you a corporation. And also the whole claiming to be a judge thing. Well, I could claim to be a fairy troll master, but unless I can prove it, there's no one that's going to believe it. So why are all these idiots out there believing when somebody says, I'm a judge, without proof? But that's just my opinion. So today is May 8th, May 12th.
12th.
Yeah, I'm getting it, Ed. I'm getting it. 2018, it is Saturday, and we will see you tomorrow at 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time for Education by Ed. Bring your notebooks and definitely bring last week's homework. And if you didn't get last week's homework, well, you might get an F for that class. Thank you very much, and have a good night.